So now we're on Daf Nun Dalet of Beis, and Rabbah is going to tell us now what is the battlefield, the controversy between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. In its natural state, originally the meat had the shear of what? Of a kibetza, to be makabel tumah. But vitzomak. Now you cook the meat and it shriveled down and it doesn't have a shear of kibetza. But v'chazar v'tofach. Somehow he removed the liquids, he crushed out the liquids that were absorbed in the meat, and he what's the word I'm looking for? He restored, if I could use that word, the original state of the meat, that it's now less than a kibetza. So what's the machlokas here? Demar sovar yesh dichui b'isura. Umar sovar ain't dichui b'isura. Let me just get it straight here. Right. So again, vitzomak. The middle stage is what we want to focus our attention on when it did not have a shear. Because of its tzoma. Just 1 second. Again, with your permission, I want to go backwards. Let's go. Umar sovar ein dichui be'isura, which means the following: that it's going to be tohar, which is Rabbi Yochanan, right? That was Rabbi Yochanan, no? Shtarin kamot shehein. No. Just 1 second. Right, what was Rav Yochanan said, Mishtarin kamot shehein, as they are now, and now, just 1 second. Oh, very good. Initially, it had a shear of kibetza. Now today, it has a shear of kibetza. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan is going to say that it's makabel tumah. That's called ein dichud. But let me explain it now through the eyes of Rish Lakish. Mar Sovar, I'm going backwards. This is Rish Lakish. Yesh dichui be'isura. That even though now it has the shear, even though now it does not, even though now it has the shear, I guess he cooked it a second time. I'm not exactly sure that physically how that happens, okay? But let's say, again, it's not relevant, but just for the purpose of Lasabris Ozen, he cooked it again. Now it absorbed the shear and the volume of a kibbutz, so exactly as it was initially. And yesh tichu, that since at one point in time it was in its stomach and it had less than the shear, it's already dochui, means it's pushed away from Kabbalah's tumah, because at that point in the middle stage, it did not have a shear. Whole nother pshat in the machlokas here. Frekti Gemara Mikol Madi Omer Di Yesh Dichui Bi Isurim. In other words, how could Reish Lakish say that yesh dichu bisurim, and since in the middle stage it was nitztamik, therefore it's not makabel tuma for tnan. What are we going to do with the Mishnah in Trumos? Let's see if I'm right. In Taros, we get Truma's going to be around the corner. Kibetza ochlin sheinicha bechama. So you have an ochel, a foodstuff, and it had a shear of kibetza, but you left it in the sun v'nismatu, right? It dried up and it shrank. V'chein, alternatively, kizayis min ames, or kizayis min an avela, of an animal that died without shchita, and therefore it's metame, or kadasha min hasheretz, which is the shear of the dead sheretz for contaminating ukazais pigul, ukazais nosar, again the shear of ukazais for the tumas yadayim, ukazais chelev. So you had a kazayis of chelev, and if you eat the kazayis of chelev, you have kares, but now it shrank, so you don't have a kazayis. It was left in the sun. Is tahorim, right? Because today it doesn't have a shear of kizayis. Then chayov lev mishum pigul v'nosa v'chelev. What is that? That's just a warning, right? That's a siren or a warning? That's the warning. Yeah.
We didn't get one here yet.
Okay. So we have a warning here. I'll leave the window open to hear if there's a siren. Is he nichan b'geshamim v'tafchu? So after he left it in the sun and it shrank, now it swelled up because of the rainwater. Tmeim. We don't say dichui b'isurim. We don't say that since at one stage it had shrunk due to the heat of the sun, therefore it's not tameh. We look at it as now, and it went back to its original state. So the Gemara doesn't have an answer to that. But let's just summarize that according to Rabba's interpretation, anything that shrank is going to be assessed by its current volume, which means kimot shehen. Toshma, what is he going to do with the case of Truma? And actually, we're going to talk about Truma's Maser, which means that you gave Maser to the Levi, and the Levi has to give a tenth of his Maser, 10% of 10, to the Kohen. Anyway, Tarmin te'enim al hagrogos b'minyan. So what happens? You have te'enim, which are moist in their natural state, and therefore they're blown up. They have a volume. And then you have grogos, which means that you dried the te'enim in the sun, and now it's shrunk. And there are two ways of evaluating the maser, 10%. One way is called b'minyan, and the other way is called b'mida. And here the Brisa says b'minyan, that you simply count up. So you had, let's say you had to give 10 te'enim, now they're grogos, you give 10 grogos. But the problem is that 10 grogos is not going to be equivalent to 10% of the original te'enim. I could understand that if you'll apply the rule of kmot shehen, that means how do you calculate the 10%? You look at it as it is now, and therefore if he gives 10 grogos, that's considered maser, that's 10%. That's fine. But if you're going to say that we go back to the original state, and you have to give 10% of te'enim, which are moist in the natural state, and they are larger than havile marbe b'masros. That if you're going to count up the te'enim, if you're going to count up the grogros, then that's called marbe b'masros. One second, why is it marbe b'masros? This I understood this when I learned it, but let's see. One second. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I made a mistake. It says Tormin te'enim ala grogros. So what he has is, let's say he has te'enim and he has grogros, and he's going to be mafresh the te'enim, but the te'enim are larger in volume, and now you're holding now kimot shehem, that we look at as they are now. So as they are now, the grogros, which he's trying to take off a tithe of the grogros, are much smaller, they've shrunk. And now if he gives 1 fig for every 10 grogros, then he's being marbe b'masros. It's more than 10%. Vatanya marbe b'masros, perosov misukonim, umasrosov mikulkolim. So it means that this is not a valid maser if you give more than maser, which is very interesting. So therefore, we have to come to the conclusion that kimot shehen misharina. I'm sorry, that likamot shehen misharina. Meaning not as they are now, but as they once were. Meaning we look at the dried figs as if they were natural, moist figs. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute. I don't think that your understanding is going to satisfy us. Elamai, what are you going to say? L'kamot shehen is a masefo. Let's look at the end of the brisa. And it says, grogros al hate'enim b'mida. Then in the opposite case, instead of being mafresh te'enim in the natural state, 4 grogros after they're dried, he's going to mafresh grogros, which already shrunk, to remove the Isur Tevel and give maser on te'enim, which are larger. Iyamet bishlem b'kamot shehen shapir. Just 1 second. Why does it work out well if you hold kamot shehen? Just 1 second. But let me just read one more line, sorry. Ela iamet likamot shehen, meaning you go back to the natural state, and he's being mafresh what? Grogros. And he's doing it b'mida. B'mida means by volume. And he's going back to the natural state. Then marbe b'masrasu. So even if we hold kamot shehen, even if we hold likamot shehen, which means go back to the original status, then it's still marbe b'masros. Again, I just want to go over it one more time in my mind. He's being mafresh now grogros on te'enim b'mida, meaning he's going to start, right? He's going to start measuring the volume, and he's going to give 10% of the grogros on te'enim. So why is that called? Because if we're going to hold the kamot shehem, we go back to the original state. It's marbe b'masros, right? Right, because we're going to look at the grogros as they were in their natural state when they were full and moist with a larger volume. But yet he's looking at the volume of the grogros. So he's going to be marbe because we hold that we go back to the original state, meaning he's doing the umdana. In other words, he's measuring it out b'midah. And then if he's doing it b'midah, well, if we go back to the original state, then it's marbe b'masos. Ela hacha b'truma gedolas kinon. The Gemara says, no, we made a mistake. We thought we were talking about trumas maser. We're talking about truma gedola. Now, on a deraisa level, truma gedola has the principle of chita achas poteres akli. All you have to give is the minimum amount. The Rabbanan made a takana that he should give either 1/40th, which is called an ayin tova, or 1/60th, which is an ayin ra, a little bit stingy, or 1/50th, which is an ayin benedis. Reisha b'ayin yofa, v'seifa b'ayin yofa. So ayin yofa means he's giving 1/40th. So again, now that we're dealing with Truma Doraisa, that Chitachas Poter Sakli, and we're only dealing with the Drabanan of whether he gives Ba'ayin Yofa generously or not, then therefore all these issues about, if he's giving more than he should, it's irrelevant, because Adarab, we want him to give as much as he can to the Kohen. In fact, the Gemara, Yihachi Ema Seifa, Rabbi Loza, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Loza reports about his father Rabbi Yossi that Abba Hayanotel Eser Grogros Shebe Maktsua. Maktsua is a kind of a utensil. Al Tishim Shebe Kalkola, and Kalkola is also a kind of a basket. So he's giving 10 Grogros, leaving out 90. The 90 are in the Kalkola, those are te'enim, in their fresh state. The Ibit Truma Gdola, Eser Mayavidite. Why was his father giving Eser Grogos? That's 10%. I mean, even an Ayin Yofa will only give 2.5%, or I don't know what 1/40 is. Elahach, we have to go back to our original position that Petrumas Masa Askina. We're talking about Truma that's given by the Levi to the Kohen, 10%. We're not talking about Truma Gedola. The Abel Lozer ben Gomel. So why is this Brisa recommending that you give 1/10? Which I think means that he's being marbe b'masros, because we're following Abba Elozah ben Gomel, who equates Trumas Maser with Truma Gedola. And just like in Truma Gedola, you can give generously, because Midoraisa, all you need is Chita Achas. So too, according to Abba, in Trumas Maser, it has basically a status of Truma, and therefore you can give generously before, again, the Torah requires Maser, but you can give more than a Maser. The Sanya, Abba Los ben Gomel Omer, V'nechshav lachem Trumaschem, and this is in Bamidbar Perek Yud Ches, V'nechshav lachem Trumaschem kedagan min agoren ukmleya min hayekev, and you separate Truma, the Levi separates Trumas Maser, it's considered like what? Kidagan minagoren, which is a reference to Truma Gedola. And therefore, b'shtei Trumas HaKos Medaber, Achas Truma Gedola, Achas Trumas Masik, Shem She Truma Gedola, and he tells us Ba'omed. We don't care how much you give, because the Torah in Truma Gedola accepts one chita. Ube machshava, again, that's going to be a big machlok between Rashi and Tosafot what machshava means. Rashi also machshava means you have to enunciate it and orally, even though you weren't mafresh it. And no senenu mitzad zeh v'olcha mitzad zeh. Kach trumas maser nitelis ba'omed. So the 10% required for trumas maser may be separated by estimation, even though 10% might not be exact. And the entire separate amount will have the status of Trumas Maser, even if it exceeds 10%. So this will solve all our problems, because if we go like Abba Elazar, then it means that all your problems about Kamida and Kaminion, and then maybe is being Marbe Masa, there's no problem being Masa, being Marbe Masa. We'll just finish up here on the top of Nun Hey Ubimachshav. Anyway, according to Lazar, Abba Lazar, 1/10 for Trumas Masa need not be precise. Is ma Truma Gedola ba'ayin Yofe, Trumas Masa ba'ayin Yofe should give generously even beyond 10%. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop. And tomorrow's daf will be Nun Hey. And then I guess on Sunday at noon, we'll do Nun Vav. So let me wish you a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you so much.